Good evening, everybody. My name is Glenn Butcher, and I want to welcome you all to the fourth evening in our Newton-Wellesley Hospital Healthcare Career Exploration Series. I'm a member of the Workforce Development Council, and I'm also the Senior Director of Global Digital Marketing at Vertex Pharmaceuticals. Now, over 30 years ago, I was wondering what I wanted to pursue as a career. And for many variety of reasons, I decided I wanted to do something related to healthcare. Primarily, I thought it would be an interesting and career, and I have to say it's never failed to deliver on that front. What I didn't know at that point was how meaningful it would become. Healthcare is something that impacts all of us, our families, our friends, and billions of people who we'll never meet. And that is what attracted me to the Workforce Development Council. This amazing group of people are passionate about improving healthcare opportunities, especially with our area youth. And the goal of the council is to expand potential career options in the community in hopes of enhancing family financial security and helping to have a strong pool of talented people, such as yourselves, to work at local businesses. All of this ultimately translates to improved health and wellness for our community as a whole. Some of the work of our council includes the Waltham Summer and Youth Intern Program, in which Newton-Wellesley Hospital sponsors, on average, 20 students in paid positions at the hospital each summer. They also educate students and adults in programs like this about healthcare careers across all levels. And with that, I would like to introduce Beth Downey, Chief Information Officer at Newton-Wellesley Hospital and Chair of the Workforce Development Council. Beth?
Thanks so much, Glenn. Good evening, everyone. We are so excited that you've joined us for the fourth and final panel discussion of our Healthcare Career Exploration Series, where you will hear from healthcare professionals about their careers in various healthcare roles. We will discuss their career journeys, the education requirements for their roles, and some of their day-to-day experiences. We will provide an opportunity for you to ask questions of our panelists and understand their role and career journey to determine if it might be something of interest to you. So as Glenn said, my name is Beth Downey and I'm the Chief Information Officer at Newton-Wellesley Hospital, and I'm the chair of our Workforce Development Council, which is the host for tonight's event. So I will also be the moderator this evening. So we want these sessions to be as interactive as possible and provide you with an opportunity to ask questions to the panelists. So please use the Q&A feature to submit any questions that you want, and then I will pose those questions to the speakers. So I do encourage you to submit those questions in as early as you have them. So we'll start with a discussion, but then any questions that you have, put them in as soon as you think of them. So we also are recording this session, and it will be posted to our Newton-Wellesley Hospital YouTube channel for future viewing. We also have the videos, the recordings from our 3 first sessions on our YouTube channel as well. So we'll talk about that a little bit more at the end. So tonight's panel discussion focuses on technologist careers. So the panel includes a radiologic technologist, a medical laboratory scientist, a pharmacy tech, surgical tech, physical therapy assistant, and a rehab aide. So the panelists will introduce themselves and I'll ask them a series of questions, and then we'll open it up to questions from the attendees. So again, I encourage you to start submitting any questions that you might have. So what I want to do right now is invite all of our panelists to turn on their cameras. Excellent. So I'm going to advance my slides here. So the first, our first panelist is Sheila Lenahan, and she's a radiologic technologist. And then Barbara Schwartz is a medical laboratory scientist. Martin Berry is a pharmacy tech. Jocelyn Odom is a surgical tech. Ferdinand Gobar is a physical therapy assistant. And Tiffany Sang is a rehab aide. So welcome to everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. We are very excited to have you all here to share your career journeys and information about your chosen profession and sort of what made you want to do it. So the first thing I will do is I'll go around to each person. Well, actually, the first thing I will do is I will stop sharing my screen so that we can see us all nice and big. No need to have all of our names up there. Okay, so I will go around one at a time and ask you each to introduce yourself. Tell us again what your role is at Newton-Wellesley, and then maybe where you're from, a little bit of personal information about you, whatever you feel comfortable sharing, what schools you may have attended, and how long you've been at Newton-Wellesley. So Sheila, why don't we start with you?
Hi, good evening, everyone. So my name is Sheila Lenahan. I am the clinical preceptor, educational coordinator in radiology, and I'm also a radiologic technologist. I started out right here at Newton North. Wasn't sure what I wanted to do when I was in high school and started out in a community college. I went to Mass Bay Community College in Wellesley. Still not sure what I wanted to do and chose radiology. And over 30 years later, here I am, still at Newton-Wellesley. And I love the field of radiology.
Excellent. Thank you, Sheila. Ferdun, would you like to introduce yourself?
My name is Ferdun Gobar, and I'm a physical therapist assistant in Newton-Wellesley Hospital. I've been in this hospital for 21 years, and I've always wanted to work in the health field. I'm originally from Afghanistan. I had to leave the country when our country was invaded by Russia, and then we came here, and I worked for many years. I worked in a nonprofit organization, but I always wanted to get into the health field. So I went to school at a later age, and I went to Mass Bay, and they had a very good program. So that's how I ended up working in the physical therapy department.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Martin, how about you?
Hi, my name is Martin Barry. I am a pharmacy technician here at Inpatient Pharmacy in Newton-Wellesley. I have been on the team for just shy of 2 years. I came in as the pharmacy tech supervisor and later stepped away from that position as I was relocating. I found myself unhappy in my new position, so I commute back to Newton-Wellesley. I started off in a vocational high school. I did not do the pharmacy tech program. I found myself in pharmacy after working in retail as a high school job, and I very much fell into the profession. I have no formal training. I learned on the job. I learned as I went. When I needed higher certifications to advance my career and to open additional doors and additional opportunities, I elected to buy the materials and study independently, even though coursework is available at the community college level. I'm very happy to join you all today.
Thank you so much. Jocelyn.
Hello, my name is Jocelyn. I'm a surgical technologist. I've been at Newton-Wellesley for a little over 2 years now. I came right from college. Mass Bay I also went to. I just knew I wanted to do something in healthcare, but I wasn't sure exactly what. I was thinking nursing at first, but then I wanted to see, because there's so many different branches you can branch into that I didn't even know about. And then I looked at all the courses that Mass Bay offered, and I found surgical tech, and I absolutely love it.
Great. Thank you. Tiffany.
Hi, I'm Tiffany. I'm a rehab aide here in outpatient rehab services. So I work with a bunch of physical therapists, occupational therapists, and speech pathologists. I recently graduated from Boston University in May. So I started working at this job a week after I graduated. And so it's been about 8 or 9 months now that I've been in the role. And yeah, so I'm looking to pursue occupational therapy in grad school eventually.
Excellent. We hear that a lot from folks who are in various roles when we've done these panel discussions, that they're still in school and they have a desire for a future career in the same sort of area, but they're continuing their education. So awesome, thank you. And then Barbara, we'll round it out with you.
Hi, my name is Barbara Schwartz. I am the incoming off-shift supervisor in the clinical laboratory. I start on Monday. So I'll be working mostly, once I'm trained, I'll train on days, and then I'll move over to mostly second shift and third shift when necessary. working with the techs, filling in on the bench, but also doing some of the scheduling and any other projects that need to be done in the laboratory. I took the long way. I went to college for a couple of years right out of high school. I changed my major 5 times, had no idea what I wanted to do. So I needed a job, and my job happened to have been, the first job I got was a client service representative in a clinical laboratory. And I loved it. So I did that for a few years. And then I said, hey, maybe I'll become a phlebotomist. So I got my phlebotomy certification at Massasoit Community College and did that for a few years and said, hey, maybe I'll do the next step. And I became a medical laboratory technician, which is officially a 2-year degree. I was able to do that at Southeastern Voc Tech. And I worked as an MLT for years and years. As a single mom, it helped me keep a roof over my head. The schedule was flexible. I was able to work nights and weekends and be around for my kid. And while I was doing that, I went to Boston University, yay, BU. I saw Tiffany went to BU, and got a bachelor's degree in my 40s. And then went to UMass and got a master's degree in my 50s. And I'm coming back. I switched from working in the lab to education. I worked in the MLT and phlebotomy programs at Quincy College, and I was there for 6 years, but I really miss being on the bench and in the lab. So coming back into the lab at Newton-Wellesley.
Excellent. That's great. Thank you all so much for sharing that. So I think the next thing I want to get into, part of what we really want to review with the attendees today is give them an idea of what your job is all about. So I think we'll go around, one person at a time. And if there are, like I'll use Barbara, for example, if there are multiple sort of levels of the type of job, so you've got the med tech and then the medical laboratory scientist, if you can sort of explain both of those. But really what I want to get at is like, what do you do all day? What is it like to do your job specifically? Because I think, like, I know myself, I've gone to the lab at Newton-Wellesley, but I don't really know what exactly they do there. If somebody's been in the hospital and had physical therapy, they probably know what Verdun does. But if you haven't, then you don't know. So that's sort of what I want to do. I think probably everybody's had an x-ray, so they're probably going to know what Sheila says. But so I'll start with Sheila. So we'll go around Robin again. So if you can just sort of explain, and I don't know if there are multiple levels of rad tech. And so we'll get into the educational requirements afterwards, but if you can just sort of explain what is the role?
Okay.
What is it like?
So for a radiologic technologist, any given day, you could be assigned into the emergency room where you're going to see patients coming in from that have motor vehicle accidents, falls. You could be assigned to the main department where you would be imaging patients that are coming in, outpatients or inpatients, patients in the hospital. One aspect of radiology that I wasn't aware of when I started the program was the operating room. We're extremely busy up in the OR. During, we can staff 6 or 7 techs in one given day in the operating room. We go up to the intensive care unit. We have portable imaging that we can bring to the floor for those patients that are not able to come down to us. We're up in the special care nursery. We're really everywhere in the hospital. And then we also have the different modalities of radiology. So you have radiology, and then you can go into CT, nuclear medicine, mammography, interventional. What else am I forgetting?
MRI.
What's that?
MRI. Did you
MRI. Yeah. Can't forget MRI. I was an interventional tech several years ago, so which is always nice. You can go off, you can branch into some different modalities. We're a 24-hour, 7-day-a-week department, so we're always busy, and that's nice for people that want to work weekends, people that work the overnights.
So the tech is the person who's actually working with the patient and taking the image.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah. And it's the radiologist that reads the images. Not to say that we don't know what we're looking at, because we are trained to look. We better know what we're looking at, but we're not reading the images. It's the radiologist's job.
Okay. So for anyone who's had an x-ray or any one of those imaging tests, the tech is the person that is interacting with the patient.
Yes. So it's the radiologist
setting it all up and sliding the little things in and going behind the wall and all of that. Putting the lead apron on you. That's the tech, right?
That is the tech.
Excellent.
Yeah. And it could be one of the students. That's my job here. And I work with the students So you could, if you're coming in for an X-ray, it might be one of my students that's taking your X-ray under the supervision of a technologist.
Excellent. All right, great. Ferdinand, why don't we go to you? Can you explain what it is like to do your job? What exactly do you do?
So I work in the inpatient part, which means I work with patients who are hospitalized, who are on the beds in the hospital in different units. And I work in different units from orthopedic patients to post-op surgeries, general surgeries, and general medical issues. And our job is to help improve their strength and their mobility, which helps in their recovery.
Excellent. So do you do lots of like exercises with the patient before they're discharged and assess them to make sure?
Right. Exercises and general mobility to make sure that they're safe. If they're going home, it would be safe to be able to go home. If not, you can find other ways, whether they should need to go to a short-term rehab or other means to make sure that they're safe at home.
Excellent. So like if someone gets a knee replacement or a hip replacement,
Yes.
is it the physical therapy assistant that's getting them up, walking around, assessing to make sure they can walk safely and correctly and all of that? Is that what you're doing?
So the way it works is initially with all patients, a physical therapist, that's the initial eval.
Okay.
And then they set goals for these patients. And that's where I come in and follow up and make sure that they can follow the plan, and hopefully they'll meet their goals, or if there's a change, then I contact the physical therapist.
Okay. So you're
they
helping
reassess.
the patient meet
Yes.
their goals.
Yes.
Excellent. All right, great. Thank you. So why don't we jump to Tiffany next? Because I think, Tiffany, you're in the outpatient part of physical therapy. So why don't you explain what the rehab aide role is all about?
Sure. So yeah, I'm in the outpatient side, which means that the patients are coming from like their home over to the hospital, into our clinic to come visit us for their services. And so I help out in all different aspects, mainly with the physical therapist, but there's also like occupational therapy, speech pathologists, and hand therapists that we have too in the clinic. So kind of what I'll help do is helping with patients coming in and out and transporting them, or preparing treatment rooms, helping maintain like inventory and stock. So kind of keeping the whole clinic organized. And sometimes I'll help out in the front desk area too. So like rehab aides, we're all over the place kind of, which is kind of nice that every day is a little different.
Excellent. All right, great. Thank you. Martin, can you explain what your role is? And I think you also, from your description, have worked sort of in the retail space in like outpatient pharmacy versus the inpatient. So if you could sort of explain all of that to give people an understanding of what a pharmacy tech would do in those various different settings, that would be great.
Absolutely. Thank you, Beth. So first off, I'm assuming most people don't really know what a pharmacy technician is or have ever heard of the job title. Most of us are familiar with pharmacists. They
That's
have
a good assumption.
a strong clinical knowledge. The pharmacy technician role is under the pharmacist in support of both the patient and the pharmacist. The easiest way to jump into what a pharmacy technician does is to first explain what they cannot do. The limit of both stages of licensure for a pharmacy technician prohibits me and all pharmacy technicians from providing any clinical information or guidance to the patient or to the provider. We may not do a final check on an order or a preparation or a dispense. That level of care is reserved for the pharmacist. From there, in the retail setting, a pharmacy technician would be responsible for intake of prescriptions, collecting patient information, demographics, identifiers, insurance information, processing the claim to the insurance company, selecting the medication, filling the bottle, counting the pills, doing other clerical tasks, inventory management, forwarding that work to the pharmacist to be verified, and then providing the patient with that point of care service of dispensing. In the inpatient setting, there are much more pathways that the pharmacy technician can take. At Newton-Wellesley alone, we have 3 pharmacies. We have the inpatient pharmacy that prepares and manages all preparations for all inpatients, including IV therapies that are compounded on site, some non-sterile topical preparations that are mixed here, and supporting restocking and troubleshooting our automated dispensing machines, which are essentially very fancy vending machines for medications that are throughout the site. We have a perioperative pharmacy that supports our partners in the surgical center, doing all sorts of stuff that you would see only in a very specialized pharmacy like that. And we also run an oncology pharmacy to support the Mass General Cancer Center at Newton-Wellesley, where we compound very hazardous drugs, chemotherapy agents for those patients. So in a day-to-day operation, we are a 24-hour operation. Regardless of what shift you're working, you would come in, you would look at, what high priority items are pending, what stat orders are there any mixes that need to be made for critical patients. We have timed runs throughout the day where we pull medication off the shelves, prepare it to be checked by a pharmacist, and then bring it to the technology-based dispensing in the units. Other functions include clerical operations, preparing code carts, all sorts of on-demand and in-demand tasks.
Excellent. Can you explain what compounding is?
Compounding is following a predetermined recipe to bring together commercially available products and manipulate them and produce something that is not that is the sum of its components, but is unique in the sense that it is not something you can purchase from a wholesaler.
Okay. So you're making the medication from the parts that put it together.
Exactly. We take a base solution and an active ingredient and combine them in the correct proportions to deliver a final product that the physician has ordered. The reason that these products are not available commercially is oftentimes due to a lack of stability once they're combined. They have a shorter shelf life. So
you can't buy them pre-prepared. Thank you. That was a very helpful explanation. Okay, Jocelyn, would you like to explain your role?
Yes. So as a surgical technologist, I work in the operating room, and our job is to maintain and create.
We have a cat visitor.
So we maintain and we create the sterile field for the surgeries. We work next to the surgeon and we pass instruments. We're in charge of making sure we know all the instruments that we need for the surgical procedure, whatever it may be. We do a lot of different procedures, any surgeries. We all bounce all around. So we have to know what you need for each different surgery. We pass instruments.
So like on TV, when the surgeon says
Yeah.
scalpel,
Yes,
you hand them the scalpel.
person. And then sometimes we're assisting by holding retractors to hold the cavity open. We really do a lot of different stuff. You're right there at the surgical field. So you're like, I think still to this day, it's like amazing, all the different stuff that we can see, because you're seeing a different part of the human body like every day. And you're right there. Like you would never really be able to see that with anything else. We do our 3 to 5 minute hand scrub all the way up to your elbows every morning. It's just a lot of being on your feet all day, I would say. So if you're not a fan of that, because some of the surgeries can be up to 8 hours, and you're there the whole time, standing there, assisting.
Wow.
Count. And then we need to make sure that there are no retained items inside of the patient. So we're in charge of doing the surgical count with the nurse to make sure we have everything we started with. And that's where kind of the x-ray can come in, because if we're missing something, then x-ray will come in and take an x-ray if we can't find something. So I love it. It's just
it's the type of job that if you're squeamish, you're not going to like it, right?
That's very important. Yes.
Okay.
Because blood, every other bodily fluid. So
yeah, I bet.
Bones, everything.
And then I have a very important follow-up question. What is your cat's name?
His name is Maxwell.
Maxwell. Excellent. Well, Maxwell is part of the panel tonight.
Wanted to show of himself.
Well, he will continue to interrupt you. That is what cats do. So then Barbara, if you can round us out. And so if you can explain the few different levels of roles for the med
Sure.
techs.
So for med techs, we generally have two levels, the MLT, which is the medical laboratory technician, and the MLS, which is the 4-year degree. It's a bachelor's level position. Right now, really the big difference between the two is the ability to supervise. And you generally need the 4-year to supervise. But other than that, MLTs and MLSs, we work side by side doing a lot of the same things and working together a lot of times, especially. So people will say, oh, what do you do? Because most of the time no one sees the lab.
You get your blood drawn. I think everybody knows how that works when you're a phlebotomist, and then the tubes disappear.
Right.
And nobody knows what happens.
To us.
Yes.
They come
so
to the
if you
lab.
can describe what happens and what you do with them.
Sure. So we test blood, anything that comes out of the human body, blood, body fluids, biopsies are more pathology, but anything that comes out of the human body, most of it is blood-based in the clinical laboratory. We use gigantic analyzers that can test multiple specimens, doing multiple tests at the same time. So we can have 100 specimens on an analyzer, and they're running kidney functions and liver functions and your glucose and your potassium and your thyroid levels, and they're doing them all at once. And we can be looking in a microscope, literally counting your white blood cells and seeing whether they're normal. One of the most horrifying things that sometimes happens is someone will come into the emergency room not feeling well, they're kind of tired or they've got a headache or whatever, and they haven't felt well for a while, and the specimen gets down to the lab, and as a tech, you're sometimes the first person you look in the microscope and you're looking at leukemia. And nobody else knows yet that the patient has it. But the cool thing is the patients come in all the time, so we see the specimens improve, and we see when they get better too. So that's really cool. We work in microbiology, literally growing things on petri dishes. In the blood bank with transfusion medicine, we cross-match blood so people can get transfusions. And now the big thing, everyone's hearing about is we do PCR testing for COVID-19, but also we do PCR testing for a whole bunch of other diseases. We can do respiratory panels for PCR to see if you have the flu or if you have COVID or if you have RSV. We can do PCR panels on stool specimens to really quickly see if someone has C. diff or salmonella or Shigella, so speeding up treatment. The really interesting thing about the lab is that the latest statistic is that about 70% of medical decisions are based on what the laboratory tells the practitioner. And no one ever sees us. So if you like science and you want to get into patient care, but you're like me, and I don't want to be like Jocelyn. I do not want to see what's inside the patient.
I'm right there with you.
It's still a really good way to do science and patient care.
Yeah, that's great. And I will say, and we can sort of talk about this with other roles too, I do know that the medical technologist is a position that is not a lot of people go into. And I think some of it is because not a lot of people know about it, because like you said, you are behind the scenes. So some folks who are in, like, let's say the physical therapy area, you're a little more seen because you're taking care of patients when they're awake, and like the rad tech, people know about that. Probably a lot of people don't know about Jocelyn because they're asleep by the time they're in the room with her. Martin's behind the scenes like you are, so people don't know what those are. But I know the med tech roles, if somebody goes into that and gets their training, they're pretty much guaranteed to get a job pretty easily. Would you agree with
Yes,
that? Because
absolutely.
there's a lot out there.
Yeah.
So yeah, so
Yeah.
if you, unlike some careers where you can go to school and then you come out and it's really hard to get a job in that area of your coursework, medical technologist is not one of those. You will most likely find a job pretty easily.
You will always find a job, definitely.
Okay,
Yeah.
great. Okay. So I think next, why don't we dig into a little bit about what the educational requirements are? So I'll go around again, and if there are, so for some of you where there are multiple levels of the type of role, if you, any information that you have that you want to share about the educational requirements, and if you know of any schools that, like if we work with any schools specifically at Newton-Wellesley who have programs, because I think some things might require internships and clinical hours and different things like that. So Sheila, why don't we start with you?
Okay, so for rad tech, you need to have an associate degree. A lot of my students have bachelor's degree, and they've come into radiology as a career change. I didn't go that route. I came right from high school, went in and got my associate's degree. That's the minimum requirement that you need. A lot of staff here have bachelor's, and if you want to move on to like an education position like mine or a management position, you would need a bachelor's degree. The community college, we have several community colleges in the area, and they're all wonderful. I deal with Middlesex Community College in Bedford. That's where my students come from. And we also will be dealing in the future with Bunker Hill with an evening program. But there are several programs. There's Massasoit, Mass Bay, Bunker Hill, Regis. And then there's a few places for the bachelor's, like let's see, University of Hartford, Quinnipiac. There's a lot of schools in the area that you could go on for your bachelor's degree. What else? You need to have, for prerequisites, you'd have to have anatomy and physiology 1 to get into the program. It was pretty competitive to get into the program, but there's a lot of jobs out there. We have a huge shortage of rad techs right now. So as you were talking about previously, if you graduate with a degree in radiologic technology, you can definitely find a job because there's a huge shortage.
Is the shortage gotten worse after COVID?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
But
definitely.
You still had a shortage before?
We had a shortage before, but it's even more so now.
Okay. And then do they need to do a certain number of clinical hours?
It's a competency-based program, so it's not really based on hours. So for instance, I have with my first year students, they'll be in the college, they'll be learning about the anatomy and physiology of a chest or an abdomen. Then they'll come in and I'll be working with them, and I'll bring them in, we'll have a patient, and I'll show them how to take a chest x-ray. And then they'll try it on their own under the direct supervision of myself or another one of the staff technologists, and then they'll be graded on it. And once they perform that competency, then they can perform the exam by themselves.
Okay. So do all school programs have an affiliated hospital?
Yes.
Like you? Okay. So
Yeah.
Is that something that students need to look for, or do they all have it?
Every program will have it. It's because it's all clinical based.
Okay.
And then you'll do a rotation, usually in more than one hospital. So for instance, I'm dealing with students from Middlesex Community College. They'll go to what they call a big and a small hospital. So the hospitals that are affiliated with Middlesex, of course, Newton-Wellesley, Leahy, Emerson, Saints, and Winchester. So if you do a rotation your first year in Winchester, they consider that a smaller hospital. Then you would either go to Leahy or Newton-Wellesley, since we're a larger hospital.
Oh, we're the big one?
We are the big one.
Look at that.
And for Newton-Wellesley, we have everything here, because we have, some hospitals don't have pediatrics. Some of them don't have a pain clinic. When I tell my students, when they come to Newton-Wellesley, they're extremely lucky because we have everything here.
Great. Good. I wanted to clarify that because I think in some roles that we featured in the panel, they don't always, not all programs have that affiliation. So it's important to make sure, but it looks like all of them that they would pick have some sort of affiliation.
Yeah. So if you were looking at a program, I think it would be important to look to see what hospitals they're affiliated with, because you want to see where you're going to be traveling to.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah.
Excellent. Okay, Fredoon, can you go through the educational requirements for your role? There you
At
go.
Downey. So the program itself is 2 years, and it's an associate degree in science. But before getting into the program, you have to do prerequisites, which generally takes a year. You have to have anatomy, physiology 1, 2, biology, psychology, basic psychology, and also you have to be in a certain level of math and English. So generally it takes about 3 years, and the 2 years for the program is a continuous. You have classes throughout the summer. So it's a pretty intense program, but if you like the field, it's well worth it.
Great. So so is it at community colleges typically that you can get these programs?
Generally, yes. I went to Mass Bay. I don't know if they still have that program.
Okay.
But I'm sure there are other community colleges that.
Okay.
have
And did
this.
you have to do certain amount of clinical hours before you could apply for a position?
No, not at that time.
Okay.
It may have changed now, but no. You just had to have all your prerequisites.
Okay, great. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Tiffany, why don't we go to you next?
Sure. So for the rehab aide role, no education is necessary, like just like a high school degree or equivalent. But I think historically, the past rehab aides have all had like a bachelor's degree or so related to like health sciences or something similar. I know one of my colleagues, he has a master's degree in strength and conditioning, but not necessarily like a rehab side of experience in the past. So it's a great just learning experience for anyone. I came in with no clinical experience at all, but I knew I wanted to go into occupational therapy and kind of took courses on that and saw other opportunities to kind of like see what the healthcare field would be like. And then I know we've had in the past a couple volunteers, like when COVID was not as scary at the moment, that were in like high school or college who were able to like shadow and also kind of take on the rehab aide role a little bit to help out around the clinic with us. And yeah.
All right, great. So it sounds like then the rehab aide role is if someone's thinking that they are interested in physical therapy in some way, shape, or form, a rehab aide could be a really great place to start because you're getting exposure to all these different types of things. So are you more interested in physical therapy or occupational therapy or different things like that? You can really get a good idea of what it is to do those other jobs. And then you could have a job maybe while you're going to school to advance your career in that direction, which can be helpful. And then I'm guessing it probably also helps to then have contacts at a hospital to be able to get another job in the future. If you decide you want to be an occupational therapist, you have the in, right?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
And everyone is really great at just like, they're willing to help you learn and support you in that way. And then they'll be like, take you in and be like, oh, if this patient interests you, you can help work with them too in like the exercises or maybe in some other sort of way in their session. So
excellent. Great. Thank you. Martin, how about you? Educational requirements.
There are no formal education requirements for a pharmacy technician role other than a high school diploma or equivalent. The individual must be at least 18 years old. There are 2 stages of licensure. The first is at the state level, and the requirements to attain that professional license vary from state to state. For the state of Massachusetts, typically, I believe it's 1,000 hours of on-the-job training, as well as an employer proctored test. So for myself, when I started in the retail setting at a supermarket in Arlington, Massachusetts, I went to that supermarket's Boston headquarters, Quincy headquarters actually, and they administered a test. And I passed, and they forwarded that information to the Department of Public Health, and the Department of Public Health Professional Licensure Bureau sent me my pharmacy tech license. For the national certification to be a pharmacy technician, which is typically the certification that we look at when we're onboarding technicians in the hospital setting. The reason for that is with the national certification, you are allowed to handle narcotics and controlled substances. With the state licensure, you are only allowed to handle Schedule 6 medications, Schedule 3 through 6. So for that, there are two companies. One is Pharmacy Technician Certification Board, based online. You can enroll in a community college program at the certificate level to train for this and pay those tuition fees, or you can get their course materials direct from this licensing certification board, and you can study independently, and then you would take the test at a testing center, which is the route that I went. And then there are further certificate programs to build on that, depending on what niche of pharmacy you go into, and collecting those can earn you a better portfolio and a more competitive salary.
So the more certificates you have, the more types of medications you can prepare and things like that?
Yes, absolutely. Again, every state is different. The controlled substance regulations in this country are a little weird because the federal has their rules and the state has their rules, and
pharmacy is not the only part of that. That's a little strange, right?
So by default, we go by whatever is the most constrained version of rules. But yes, depending where you are and what license you have, can limit your job function. So here in the hospital setting, where we have much more going on than, say, a Stop and Shop pharmacy, we look for individuals with that higher tier of licensure, which isn't to say that we wouldn't onboard an individual who's stepping into the role with no experience and to teach them on the job.
Okay.
Because again, in pharmacy, there is and has been a severe worker shortage, as there is nationally. I believe there was a story on MSNBC recently. So I think as an industry, we're expanding and learning and trying to attract people to the job.
Great. So it's another area that if you do the schooling, you'll most likely be able to easily get a job, which is
absolutely
awesome. How long do you know, if you were to go the community college route and then take the exam for that certificate, do you know how long the program would last on average? It's not like an associate degree that would be like 2 years.
No, it's a certificate program. I can't imagine it taking more than 6 to 8 months.
Okay. And then how long, just curious, did you take in your study on your own? Were you able to do it faster?
Yes, and much cheaper. But again, that was after being in the industry for 4 years, right, in different areas of the job, and asking a lot of questions, being very interested, being a critical thinker, asking an annoying amount of questions of the people that I worked with. So gaining that knowledge, not from a company or a textbook, but in the day-to-day. And they change the test occasionally, the content of the test. So the test that is available now is very different than the one that I took. But
maybe a lot harder.
No, just different content.
Okay.
So I imagine several weeks of very focused study in your free time would be sufficient on top of on the job.
Excellent. And I don't know if you would remember this to be able to answer it. Do you know if the state and the federal test were a lot different?
So it's not a state test, it's a state license. The test itself was designed at the time by Stop and Shop. So it's administered by, it may be different now, but basically that licensed pharmacy is verifying that this individual has completed the necessary work and has the necessary skills to perform at this level. And the national is much broader, as it allows the user to work in a different scope of practice.
Okay, excellent. Great. Jocelyn, would you like to explain the educational requirements for surgical tech?
Yes, so the program in total is about 2 years, prereqs being one of the years, and then the actual surgical tech classes are another year. Some of the prereqs are anatomy 1 and 2, microbiology, a math and English, a psychology class, and then the second part is more, it's just your surgical tech 1 and surgical tech 2 classes. That is a certificate. And then after you take your classes, you take a national exam, which you have to score a certain amount, and then you are a certified surgical tech once you pass. You have to do, I'm not sure the exact amount of surgeries that we had to do for clinical, but you do have to reach a number at a clinical site, another hospital, and then after that, you're eligible to take your exam. What else?
Was the school that you went to affiliated with a hospital to get you those clinical hours, or did you have to find that on your own?
Yep, they found everyone their own hospital site.
And do you know if all schools that have this program have that clinical affiliation?
I would assume so, but I can't say 100%.
But it's probably something important to make sure it has it there, because if not, you'd be on your own trying to
can't imagine.
Organize that. Yeah. Okay.
But I know that New England Tech, they have an associate's, you come out with an associate's degree as opposed to just a certificate. But I don't believe there is any difference in pay with that. So that's why I thought that the smartest financial route for myself was to do Mass Bay. And it worked out very well.
Excellent. All right, great. And then Barbara.
So with the MLT, that's an associate's degree. I did a certificate program back in the day, and I don't think there are any of those around anymore. But in order to get, so our national certifying agency is the ASCP, which is the American Society of Clinical Pathologists. There's also the AMT, but hospitals usually want the ASCP certification. You could have a certificate and then take all the rest of the classes for an associate's degree before you tested. But now it's, for an MLT, you to have an associate's degree, there are prereqs. You need biology, you need gen chemistry. And then for the associate's degree, you take all of your MLT courses, plus all of your college cores, like your histories and your maths and your Englishes. During the last semester of your associate's degree, you go out to a clinical site and you rotate through all of the departments in the laboratory. The MLS, or the 4-year degree, is the same, except you come out with a bachelor's degree, and your last semester, you do the same thing. You spend your last semester at a clinical site, rotating through all the departments of the lab.
Okay, great. So do you find that there's a lot of folks that maybe will start with the associate's degree and start working, getting a job, collecting a salary, and if they're then maybe continue on going to school?
Yeah, my experiences with that has been interesting. I've found that the MLTs, so the 2-year degrees, are generally the hospital's stable staff. Because if they want to continue their education, it's going to take them, they're working and they're going to school to get a bachelor's, and it takes them longer.
A long time.
Whereas a lot of the MLS students who come in for the 4-year degree, they do that and they want to, within a year, get into management, or they want to go to med school, or they want to go be a PA. So there's paths for both. If you have the 2-year degree, as an MLT, it's really interesting because there are several, I know UMass Dartmouth has an online MLT to MLS program, and there are a bunch of I think there's a Weber State University, there are a bunch of colleges, George Washington University has one. So you can take your MLT to MLS online and then test for that with the ASCP. The ASCP, which is our certifying agency, also has some pretty cool things, which is how I got my MLS. I had my MLT, which was my 2-year. I got my bachelor's degree. And I didn't go to an MLT to MLS program because I didn't want to do it that way. I just wanted the bachelor's degree. I got the bachelor's degree, and then with 2 years of full-time experience, I could test into the MLS position through the National Certifying Organization. So you can do that as well, which is kind of cool.
Okay, great. I do have a follow-up question that I'll throw out to anybody that it applies to. Do any of your roles, so once you get your certificate or your degree or your license or whatever it is, do any of you have to retest every once in a while to keep your certification up? Sheila, you're on mute.
Okay. So for radiology, I did fail to mention that we also do have a registry that we have to take at the end of our 2-year program. You have to pass a registry, and then you have to get continuing education credits. So every 2 years, we're required to get 24 CEUs, and that maintains our license.
So you'd have to go to seminars and different courses.
Yeah, and oftentimes even the
credits.
hospital will provide opportunities as well.
Okay.
We have to do that in the lab too. We need CEUs. It's every 2 or 3 years. We need a certain amount of CEUs. And you can get them again from going to seminars. Different facilities will provide them, or you can do them online.
Okay.
Yeah.
Anyone else? Jocelyn, were you going to say you had some?
Yeah, we also have to do them. I think they changed it. It used to be every 2 years. I believe now it's every 4 years. So you can either retake the exam, or you can do the CEUs online, like little work packets, and then you get the credits from there.
Okay. And
Physical
Martin,
therapy
Tiffany,
assistant.
for doing, yeah, go ahead.
For physical therapist assistant, as long as you're working in a hospital or a rehab hospital, your license continues. So I don't know if you don't work in these facilities, what happens.
Excellent. So Martin and Tiffany, anything for your area?
Yes.
Yeah.
For the state license, I think it's a fee to renew every few years, and then for the national certification, 20 CEUs every 2 or 3 years.
So the state license, you don't have to retest or anything. They just want your money.
It's Massachusetts.
Yes. It's like your driver's license. Just got to renew it. They take your money, but you don't have to retake the test. So we did actually get a question in from one of our attendees that Sheila, it's for you. It asks, does Mass Bay and Wellesley have an affiliation with Newton-Wellesley for radiology tech career?
No, they did previously, but they do not.
Okay,
anymore.
so you do it now with Middlesex, correct? You said?
Yes.
Do you know if Mass Bay has radiology tech and is
They
just
do.
affiliated with? They do, but it's
Oh
just
yeah,
not
Mass Bay
affiliated
has
with
a program
Newton-Wellesley.
still, but they are not affiliated. Actually, I think they do send some students to one of the orthopedic offices in the medical building here.
Oh,
But
okay.
Yeah, but that's separate from Newton-Wellesley Radiology.
Okay, so they're going to the medical office building. It would be very limited on what they have for.
They would, and they would also be going to a hospital. site as
Hospital,
well.
right, exactly.
Yeah.
Okay,
yeah.
great, thank you. All right, so again, to the attendees, if you have questions, please feel free to submit them in and I will pose them to the panelists as we go. So why don't we've touched on this a little bit, but if you can sort of explain a little bit more, and I'll go round robin again. What's a typical day like for someone in your role? So Sheila, can you just sort of explain? I know you touched on this a little bit, but if you can just kind of.
So depending on what shift, but I'll start with like the day shift. So if you're.
Oh, that's an important one is also
is.
how many different shifts there are. So that's something that I'd like to ask everyone to include, because depending on what you want for a job, you may or may not want to work in the middle of the night or on holidays.
So we range from 7 a.m. to 3:30, 8 to 4:30, 10 to 8, 3 to 11, 11 to 7. So we have
24/7.
Yeah.
Somebody is here.
We have weekends 7 to 3 on a Saturday, 3 to 11 on a Saturday, and 11 to 7 on a Saturday. We have, all kinds of shifts, which are great. When I have children, when my children were younger, before I took the role in education, I worked evenings. So I was home with my kids during the day, and then I would come to work in the evening. So that was great. So what was the other question you had about?
So yeah, just sort of like, what's a typical day like?
Okay, so we have room assignments. So room 4, for instance, is our fluoroscopy room. So I don't know if you've ever heard of like an upper GI. It's a swallow study that we do to look at your esophagus and your stomach. Patient would come in and drink barium. So you might be assigned to that room for the week. And then you would do the procedures in that room. You might be assigned to the emergency room, and you would be taking x-rays of the patients that were coming in during, from a motor vehicle accident, chest pain, falls, different things like that. You would be assigned to a general x-ray room that you would be doing inpatients and outpatients.
Excellent. All right,
Yeah.
great. So Ferdinand, if you could sort of talk about the different shifts and then a typical day, what's it like for you?
Generally, we cover from 7:30, 8 o'clock till 7 o'clock in the evening. But we don't do any work at nighttime or evening shift.
But there are folks there on the weekends, right? So is it seven?
Yes, we
Yeah.
cover weekends and holidays.
Holidays too.
So
So
it's
that's
a
an important thing for folks
Yes.
as they're thinking
Yes.
about a future career is you might not want to work on holidays.
Yes, yes. Weekends and holidays are included for all of us. We rotate. Generally, we work about 40 hours a week. Some of the therapists work 4 10-hour days, and I work 5 8-hour days. And we come in the morning and we get our assignment list of the patients that we have to see, and we go on and work with those patients.
Excellent. Do you work with different physical therapists all the time, or do they pair you up with a certain physical therapist?
It's different. It's different. Yeah, we get the list of all these patients that need to be seen, and it gets distributed among all of us, including physical therapists and physical therapist assistant.
Okay, great. Tiffany, so if you could sort of explain the hours that might be needed, days of the week, holidays, all of that. And then I think you did kind of say a little bit of your typical day, but if you can sort of just elaborate on what's your day like.
Yeah, so the great thing about outpatient is that I don't have to work holidays or weekends. I typically work a 40-hour, 5-day, 8-hour or 8 hours a day during the week, Monday through Friday. And then our clinic is open from 7 a.m. to about 7 p.m. every day. And then Fridays is a little bit of a shorter day, which is nice. But so to cover those, all the therapists and the aides will rotate, alternate days to be able to cover different times of days, different patient populations of who can make it. So for my schedule in particular, Monday, Wednesday, Fridays, I work 6:30 in the morning until 3. And then Tuesdays and Thursdays, I'll work 10 a.m. until 6:30. And then I guess for a typical day at the job, I'll come in the morning and kind of take a look at my schedule to see if any therapists have kind of booked me to work with them with a specific patient or something, or if I'm needed at the front desk at that time, depending on who's in and what is needed. But I basically kind of live in the gym area of our clinic, and I'll float around to see and assess like who needs help at that time, or where I can help out or give someone an extra hand. And then, so we'll have about like anywhere from 150 to like 280 patients a day. So kind of managing all of that and seeing like, okay, if it's a busy Tuesday with 280 patients, maybe I should stay in the gym and help out with during the time that there's a lot of overlap between all the therapists. So that means either like giving them a hand and be like, oh, I can grab your table for you and clean that off for them, which gives them an extra minute to either walk outside with their patient, make sure they get out okay, or take an extra minute even to just finish up their notes. Or sometimes I'll even walk out with the patient and wheel them out in the wheelchair, or bring their patients in, take some vital signs, or help put their patients on some thermomodalities such as like ice or heat. And yeah.
Excellent.
And then we'll just kind of help out everywhere.
All right, great, thanks. Martin, so shifts, and I suppose you could even speak to the retail part of the pharmacy if you want to, since you did have some experience there.
Absolutely. So retail setting for a pharmacy technician, I believe runs anywhere from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m., weekend hours, holidays. I think they fall bankers hours and holidays. For our pharmacies here at Newton-Wellesley, again, we have the 3 independent, semi-independent operations. The cancer center has 1 shift staggering start times for the techs. Their hours of operation, I believe, are 7:30 to 5:30.
And is that 7 days a week?
5 days a week.
5 days a week. Okay.
No evenings, no overnights, no approved holidays, very much the 9 to 5 gig. Also less walking, less running around. You're very much in the controlled environment with a lot of safety precautions and a lot of safety equipment to handle and manipulate chemotherapy drugs and supporting medications and some other tasks. In our perioperative pharmacy that supports the OR and surrounding areas, the first tech goes in, I think, at 5 a.m. and the second tech goes in around 11 and stays till 7 p.m. They do a lot of on-demand mixing, and they manage the medication restocking in the 30 odd anesthesia workstations in all of the ORs, beg your pardon, that anesthesiologists use to pick and choose medications while patients are undergoing procedures with Jocelyn. Our other pharmacy is 24 hours, 7 days a week, all holidays, snowstorms, hailstorms, anything. You're an essential employee and you're expected to come in. Those 3 shifts, day shifts, there's some staggering there. People come in as early as 5. Evening shift is very dedicated, and night shift presently have a weekend opening. So there's some cross coverage there. I myself am going to be in the pharmacy at 1 o'clock in the morning on Saturday to cover because there's a gap. Typically for a day shift tech, you come in around 6 or 7 a.m. You do a medication pull. You take medication off the shelf, and then you bring it on your run up to the fancy vending machines that are in all of the units. This occurs 3 times a day. It's staggered to account for medication that is removed in a timely manner by nursing to administer to patients. Other work that we would complete throughout the day is putting away an order, clerical organizational tasks, filling first dose medication, utilizing our fancy tube system to shoot them off throughout the hospital so that we're not running around too much. Doing restocks that do not involve automated dispensing machines. Certain departments will come up and requisition supplies. There's a lot of phone call communication, a lot of coordination with our regional pharmacist. Working on a team in such a large hospital, we are not expected to cover every unit every day. We have an assignment. It's usually broken down by floor. So, on Monday, I might be covering the 5th floor for us, which is mother, baby, and labor and delivery, and, another area unit, whereas another technician would have another regional assignment in the hospital. And that coordinates with our pharmacists who have other regional assignments in order to efficiently get things where they need to go.
Excellent. I do have a follow-up question for you. So you said the OR pharmacy is not open 24 hours a day, right?
No.
So I'm assuming if there's an emergency surgery in the middle of the night, somebody comes in through the emergency room, the main pharmacy would handle that, correct?
That's a very good question. We do have what's called an off-shift locker and an off-shift fridge. So if there is a emergent patient going in, a lot of what they would get from our OR pharmacy is available to them. If they need something custom compounded or something that's very rarely used for this emergent situation, they would get it from our main pharmacy.
Main pharmacy. Okay, great. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
All right, Jocelyn, how about you?
Yes.
Hours and all of that, and then typical day.
So I personally do 3 days, 7 to 7, so 12 hours. They also do 5 8-hour days, 4 10-hour days, and then the shifts. There's also evening shifts they do 1 to 11:30 or 11 to 11, whatever your hours are. A day looks like for me is
So if I can just clarify, so on those shifts, you guys are there still every day, holidays, everything, right?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
So, yep. And then there's
just not in the overnight, you're not scheduled, right?
We have one tech that works 7 p.m. to 7 a.m.
Okay.
on 2 techs actually, so they rotate. And then on holidays, we all rotate holiday call. Weekends, we all rotate. Weekday, someone always needs to be on call because there's always a case where there can always be an emergency surgery.
So if you're on call, are you at home and you have to come in if they paid you?
Yep. So we have to be 30 minutes from the hospital. If not, then they have call rooms where you can sleep in, and it's honestly nice to just be there, and then you just go down, do it, and then you can go back up and go to bed.
Go to bed.
Yeah. And some people are close, so they don't have to stay, but
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay.
so I usually start my day by checking my assignment at 7 a.m. And then I'll go to my room, do whatever cases I was given. We also help assist, like turn over the rooms and stuff, because everyone wants like a fast turnover time so we can keep the surgeries like on schedule. So we'll help with that stuff. Yeah, and then that's pretty much it.
So how many surgeries on average would you say? I realize that they're all different lengths, so you're clearly not gonna have the same amount every time, but on average, how many different surgeries might you have in a day, in a shift?
Per person. So usually the ortho cases they do like 5 total joints in one room. And then like if there were cataracts, those are very quick. So we can have like
Have a lot of them.
8 or 9.
So when you work for a day, you're working in that room. So if it's the cataract room, you're doing all cataracts that day.
Yep. And then, so what we also do is, so since I'm a later person, the 5 o'clock and 7 o'clock people get out the 3 o'clock people. So you may, after your cases are done, you may have to go relieve someone else that needs to go home. So then that's when you might do a different kind of surgery.
Gotcha.
But for the most part, it's like all the same all day.
For that day. And then your next day, you'd have something different.
Yeah, be completely different. Yep.
Oh, interesting. All right, great. Barbara.
So I'll just say quickly that if you want to work in a lab and you don't want to work weekends, holidays, and snowstorms, you can work in some of the big medical centers and physicians' offices that have smaller labs, but they do have on-site labs, and you'll be, Monday through Friday, no nights, no holidays, no weekends. But in a hospital lab, they're big, they're 24/7. So your nights, your weekends, your holidays, again, snowstorms, all of that. And sometimes, we've got full-timers, we've got part-timers. So, you can work 2 days a week, you can work 5 days a week. I've heard of some hospitals doing 7 nights on, 7 nights off for night shifts. So it's like you're on vacation every week. 8-hour shifts, 10-hour shifts, 12-hour shifts, depending on the hospital. And especially because there's such a staffing shortage in the labs and in the facilities, all around. We've heard in general, supervisors are trying to be flexible with schedules. If they have techs that want 10-hour shifts and they can staff the lab that way, they're trying to be flexible. So you can work full-time, part-time, any shift. The shifts in a hospital, in the lab, are different. First shift is very busy in the morning. It usually quiets down a little bit late morning, early afternoon, and then gets busy again later in the day. In the morning, we're getting specimens from the hospital from inpatients. And we're getting a ton of specimens from inpatients because physicians want to see if the patients can be discharged. So we want to see how their blood work looks. Later in the afternoon, and then it's emergency room, it's scheduled blood draws. And then once we hit 2 or 3 o'clock, we start getting busy again. We start getting outpatient blood work. We start getting blood from our physician's office, from the cancer center, from outpatient offices that the hospital associates with. So second shift is very busy because we're getting a lot of outpatient stuff coming in at the beginning of the shift. And then the emergency room gets busy when everyone gets home from work. So we get a lot from the emergency room. Third shift, as long as there are no emergencies and no one ever says, "Oh, it's a quiet night," that just gets you thrown. Yeah, that just gets you thrown out. It starts getting busy around 4 or 5 in the morning, because that's when those morning draws start to come down. If you work a first shift, a lot of times you'll specialize. You'll just work in one department. Maybe you'll be cross-trained in 2. If you work in a second or third shift, you're usually what we call a generalist. So you can be hematology, coagulation, urinalysis, clinical chemistry, microbiology, blood bank. And it's you do more running around on second and third shift because there's fewer people, but also you're covering more. So for someone like me, I like to be busy. I don't sit well. So second and third shift works for me because I can bump between different departments, and if my analyzer's running, I can go, and everything's fine, I can go help someone in another department. Whereas in first shift, at least in my last hospital that I worked at, if I failed on first shift, that would be plunked in front of one instrument for 8 hours. And for some people, that's great. And thank goodness, because we need our first shifters. If you like to be busy, second or third shift it makes the shift go by faster, and you're doing more. You're trained to do more.
And it's more of a variety.
If you like variety, second or third shift is where you want to be.
And I will say, if anyone ever has an opportunity to see those analyzers in the lab, they're really cool to see them. It's like a big assembly line machine. It's really cool to look at. I'm always fascinated when I get to visit different areas of the hospital and see all of the inner workings of the things that as a patient, you don't ever get to see. So it's very cool. Okay, I want to keep an eye on the time. I do have a few more questions for you. So this one I'll sort of throw out to anyone who wants to answer it. If we want to think about how a potential student might be paying for their education, I think if they're going to a community college, then they're most likely paying for it themselves. Are there any opportunities for an employer to help pay for any of this? So I'll throw that out to anybody who might want to answer it.
We have a lot of, when I was working in the MLT program at Quincy College and phlebotomy program, we have a lot of students who would start off as a lab processor or a lab aide. So then if they're working at the facility, they can get some tuition reimbursement while they're going to school for their phlebotomy or MLT. There are also a lot of workforce development grants out there, especially right now.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah.
Anyone else want to?
Similar in radiology, there's a lot of grants out there. And then we also have tech aides. We employ some, students as tech aides in the CT department or diagnostic radiology. And then they can get some tuition reimbursement through the hospital. And some of our techs take advantage of that when they're working on their bachelor's as well.
Mm-hmm.
Pharmacy, where there's the option to learn as you go, to be a tech in training, and then to keep training. You're paid to learn, basically, which is a nice change.
Yeah.
Albeit entry-level pay.
Right.
And then depending on the company, you can get reimbursed as you get higher certificates or as you do your CEs, depending on where you're working in your position.
Do any of them pay for the actual, do you have to pay for the exam itself, like to sit for the exam?
You pay for the exam. I think it was like $150.
Did any of your employers pay for that, or was that your own out of pocket?
At the time I was working for an independent compounding pharmacy in Waltham, and I paid out of pocket. And once I showed that I passed, they reimbursed me.
Oh, so as long as you passed. If you didn't pass, they weren't going to.
Exactly. Excellent.
So do your studying. Important. Anybody else have anything you want to add in that area? Okay, great. Anything any of you would have done differently through your career journey that you would want to share with anyone? No?
No.
All pretty pleased with your path?
Yeah.
Very pleased.
Excellent.
I can't imagine doing anything else.
That's great. How have your careers changed with COVID? So Sheila, why don't we start with you? Have things changed a lot with COVID?
For my personally, being the clinical instructor here, at one point, my students stopped coming during the really bad time of COVID. For the tech part of it, just dealing with with COVID patients. It was scary at the very beginning, you know,
Yeah.
it really was. And I give credit to the techs that are in there all the time, doing the portables.
Yeah, I think the
Was-
rad techs were a big part of
They were a
helping
huge
and
part,
diagnose all those
huge part.
patients with their
Yeah.
respiratory issues.
Yeah, yeah.
Great.
So it did, yeah. But my students came back. They probably only missed about maybe 2 months, and then they came back.
And then there's just the issue of having to wear your mask all the time around everyone.
Yeah, went through a lot of PPE.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Excellent.
Yeah.
For Dune, how has your role changed with COVID? Have you seen anything different?
Yes, we have during the when the number of COVIDs rises, we have less elective surgeries.
Mm,
So we're seeing less orthopedic surgeries and spine surgeries and more COVID patients, and having to make sure we're safe and we're keeping our coworkers safe and our patients.
yeah, so it changes the type of patients and the treatments that you're giving them.
Yes.
Okay. Tiffany, how about you? How have things changed?
I guess I came in kind of in the middle of the pandemic when I started my job, but
Oh, so it's
I
always
know.
been this way.
Yeah, exactly for me. But I know in the past, what I've heard from the previous aide I worked with, most of the outpatient team ended up working inpatient and helping with like the turn team and stuff, or stuff inside the inpatient side of the hospital. And then a lot of things went virtual, and today still we've had a number of like rises in terms of like COVID risk or exposures in terms of our patients. So a lot of our patients have been like kind of canceling or converting their visits to virtual. But our numbers are still pretty high, as you've heard. And we've just kind of been like growing in terms of patient population again. So yeah.
Yeah, I know the rehab folks were really helpful for the hospital in so many different roles, even checking employees in when we first needed to do screening of COVID for employees coming in and making sure everyone had a mask and we're using the hand sanitizer and all of that. Excellent, thanks. Martin, how have you noticed that it's changed at all for you?
It was a big change. Given that we have so many pharmacies, the initial lockdowns saw the shutdown basically of the cancer center and the OR, and that was a blessing in disguise, as it allowed us to take those labor resources and feed them into central pharmacy, which was turned on its head. Given that from the technician role, we're not involved in any clinical decisions, there was a lot of logistical changes that had to happen overnight in changing units that were previously post-surgical patients into COVID ICU overflow, and all of the medication requirements and technology changes that had to happen, and the grunt work and the hours and stuff like that. And continuing now, 1.5 years, 2 years later, certain people have left the workforce for personal reasons or for family reasons or for whatever reasons. And without an influx of new talent, we continue to see a lot of opportunities for overtime, which again, blessing in disguise, or is it?
A lot of hours, but it helps your paycheck.
A lot of hours, and the work continues to evolve, and it's really interesting to see.
Excellent. Thank you. Jocelyn, how about you?
Yeah, I would say the biggest change was the decrease in surgical volume, because we were canceling elective surgeries. A lot of the surgical techs and nurses, we went over to help with the turn team for proning the patients and in the ICU and everything. I think now it was better for a little while, and now I think we're kind of dwindling back down with the surgeries again.
Yeah.
So I'm kind of anxious to see what that'll look like again.
Can you explain a little bit of what the turn team does? I hear
Yes.
that phrase a lot.
So they were noticing that the COVID patients who were intubated needed to be turned from prone to supine back and forth every couple hours.
So is that on your back to on your front?
Yes. Yep. So
for those of us non-clinical people like me.
So we would, so we would go in and help them clean the patients, turn them, just help out the ICU nurses, just because, you know, it was very tough on everyone involved. So we were just like another helping hand. So that's pretty much what the turn team was.
Excellent. All right, thank you. And then Barbara, so I realized that you haven't even started at Newton-Wellesley yet, so you can't really speak to the changes in the lab with COVID, but how have you seen the roles as the med techs change?
What I've seen, well, because I have a lot of friends in the lab, so, you know, I've been hearing what's going on, and really because just like a lot of healthcare, you know, the different departments have talked about being short-staffed. So you're short-staffed to begin with, and testing volume is going up. So people are working a lot of extra hours. We're not patient-facing, but it's just a lot of, it's a lot of hours and a lot of time.
Yeah. Okay, great. Okay, I think I have one final question for you guys, and then we're going to wrap this up. So this one is sort of a two-parter, and Sheila's had this one before because she's a seasoned panelist on our panels here. So I usually like to wrap it up with, what is your absolute favorite, best part of your job? And then also the least favorite, because there's always a least favorite. So if you could just share what you like best, and it could be multiple things, and then maybe what you like the least about your job. So Sheila, do you want to start?
All right. I don't have to do it now, but the least favorite for me was the weekends and the holidays, to be honest with you. So I always tell everyone, if you're going to be going into certain fields in the medical field, you have to realize that you are going to have to do holidays and weekends. So that was probably my least favorite. My favorite part is every day is different, and you get to meet different patients. You know, every day is just so different. And that's what I love about it. You know, and we're on our feet all the time, which for some people, they might not like that. You have to love that. And you have to love with dealing with the public. And I love that. I love doing the pediatric patients, the adult, the geriatric patients, just meeting new people every single day.
Excellent. All right, Ferdune, favorite and least favorite?
The favorite, I just enjoy my job, being in the hospital, seeing the patients improve, being able to help them feel better. They're great. I mean, that's what I enjoy to do. I don't think I have much.
Not even like documentation or something.
Yes,
that's usually,
yes.
yeah, that's usually what people say is
Yes.
it's the necessary evil, but all that documentation, right?
Yeah, but it's still fine. I'm happy it's worth it.
Great, thank you. Tiffany, how about you?
For me, I guess part of my job is like to help clean and just make sure the therapists are like on track of their time and stuff. So like kind of helping to clean up things isn't sometimes the most glamorous part of the job, but I guess it's also something that I really kind of also enjoy, because I know that I'm helping the therapist and the patients in some way. Like even if it's such a small thing, it adds up and it makes a big difference in the therapist's lives, and they always are so thankful after. And I guess like what Sheila was saying, for her job, for the best part would also be like kind of that every day is different and meeting so many different people. Like personally, I don't think I could sit still at a desk just like by myself in an office for so long. I kind of like to get up out of my desk every like 10 minutes or so, and I have to walk around the gym or just like go talk to someone. So that's what I love about mine.
Excellent, thank you. Martin, how about you? Favorite and least favorite?
My least favorite is definitely my commute, but I chose it, so it's you know. My favorite is the amazing leadership and colleagues that I have in pharmacy and beyond pharmacy. That put together with the work that we do, I'm always learning something, so I stay interested. And I'm learning and seeing things that I otherwise wouldn't. And a lot of that is because of the work that our leadership is doing.
Excellent. Jocelyn, how about you?
I would say my favorite part of the job is being able to see something different every single day. And it always amazes me how I feel like I get to see things that like normal people wouldn't really get to see every day.
You get to see the inside of people.
Yeah, exactly. And it always amazes me. I feel like I truly learn something new every single day, even if it's the same procedure I've done a million times. I feel like I'm always learning something new. I would say my least favorite part is probably being on my feet all day, which it's worth it. But sometimes, you go home and your feet are really sore.
Do you have any good recommendations for shoes?
I love, they're called Calzuros. It's like an Italian brand, and a lot of people in the OR and just in the hospital have them, I think. They're really good support. And then obviously compression socks are big. Those are like a life changer. They're good.
Excellent. Great. All right. And then Barbara, we'll round it out with you.
My least favorite is snowstorms. Being essential in the snow, I hate it. But my favorite things are twofold. First of all, just science is so cool. Just I get to be a science geek every single day, and I love it. And also when we get those patients that, you're the first one, you look in the microscope and discover that they have leukemia, or you're in the blood bank and someone has a ruptured aortic aneurysm and you're trying to get blood from the Red Cross. And when you come back in the next day and you find out that we got them to the specialist in time, that that they lived, that they're okay. That's the coolest thing.
That's awesome. That's so great. Okay. So that was my last question. Does anyone have any final statements or information that you think you didn't get to share that you want to share with the attendees before we wrap up? No, you guys are probably all exhausted and ready to stop talking. So excellent. Well, thank you. Huge thank you to our panelists who participated in this session. You guys did an amazing job. We really appreciate your time. This information is so valuable that you've been able to provide about your job that hopefully will help someone who's trying to think about a possible career in healthcare. So on behalf of the Workforce Development Council and Newton-Wellesley Hospital, I want to thank everyone who participated in tonight's session. We hope that all of the attendees found it informative as you think about your future career journey. We invite everyone to access the recordings for all 4 of our sessions. So even all of our panelists, if you have any friends or family members who might be interested, you can go to YouTube and search for Newton-Wellesley Hospital, and you will find the channel that they created with our Healthcare Career Exploration Series. So a couple more days and this recording will be posted on there. And we will send out a thank you to all of the registered attendees with a copy of that and the link. So I just want to thank everybody for joining tonight, and I hope everyone has a great night.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you.